Good evening and good morning to everyone who's tuning in. This is part of Eretz Tzvi's 20 hours for 20 years fundraiser. Obviously, hope everyone can contribute and support the incredible work of the yeshiva. And it's an incredible privilege for me to be able to teach. Attended Eretz Tzvi already many years ago and still feel a very strong connection to the yeshiva and the Rebbeim and the Chevra from when I was there. And so it's really a wonderful thing to be able to share some Torah tonight in honor of Shavuot and the fundraiser. In particular, some of the ideas that I wanted to share tonight were actually those that I learned from Rav Ebner when he visited when I was in university. At one point, a particular Hasidic story stuck with me. I've tried to take the idea I learned from Rav Ebner and develop it a little bit of my own and with a different perspective. So you can ask Rav Ebner his own perspective on this story. I'm sure he'll tell it better than I did, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot from him as well. The topic I want to explore is one that perhaps seems intriguing or perhaps laughable, depending on where you're coming from and what time of day it is where you're right now, which is the pasuk that appears the most often in the Torah, and one that we usually rush over. It does not get very much commentary and attention, and certainly is often ignored. And that is the pasuk Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemor, probably appears somewhere around 90 or more times in the Torah. And of course, seemingly a throwaway line. God told Moshe what to say. And the interesting part is, what was Moshe supposed to say, or what was the message that Moshe received in that prophetic moment, rather than that actual opening line? Interestingly enough, in the source number one, you have at the top just a comment from Ramban in his introduction to his commentary on the Torah. Ramban says, wouldn't it have made sense for the whole Torah to begin Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor? The entire book of Bereshit is a prophecy that was revealed to Moshe as well. And maybe that would have been an appropriate way to start the Torah. And yet somehow, for some reason, not the topic of tonight's share, is why does the Torah not begin with that introduction? Why is the Torah seemingly introduced anonymously without referencing the fact that it was revealed to Moshe, and that especially the book of Bereshit, where Moshe doesn't appear at all, of course, was given to Moshe as well, and yet he's not mentioned, and the fact that it's being relayed to him is not mentioned. But that's something we can discuss further at another time. I want to progress through some of these sources. We have a short time, and to get to the Hasidic story from Rav Ebner with some interpretive lens. Another point, just to make clear, as it appears in Rambam's Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed, I have in number 2, the fact that whenever we talk about speech, God, of course, cannot speak but does not speak in a way that human beings can understand. Obviously, any notion of divine speech, communication to the prophets, we use the terms speech, amira, dibur, in the Torah, vayidaber, vayomer, as some kind of metaphorical attempt to capture in human language some process that we can't fully understand. Of course, this is something that for the Rambam's philosophical perspective is, of course, crucial to isolate divine speech as entirely distinct and separate from what we as human beings understand to be speech. I actually heard recently from a Yeshivat HaMivtar alum, Rabbi David Walkenfeld, an idea also in the name of Rav Ebner, that when we talk about Yad Hashem, right, of course, a phrase that has perplexed many of the more rationalist commentators throughout the generations, Yad Hashem being God's hand, and the question of, what does it mean for God to have a hand? So what Rabbi Walkenfeld told me in the name of Rav Ebner is actually, so to say, God has hands. These are metaphors, which is to say, again, the true reality is the divine reality. And in some sense, we are only glimpsing fragmentary or a rudimentary analogy to what God has. So human speech is some approximation of what divine speech is. Of course, that's not how the Rambam would take it, but that's a much more Rav Ebner poetic sort of take on it. And I really want to get into the Hasidic story here, and we can explore further. There's obviously a lot more to be said about all of this, but the question here is, what can we actually learn from this pasuk, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemor? And is it in fact much more important, much more interesting pasuk than we give it credit for? And with that, we'll turn to a Hasidic story here from a collection called Emunat Tzadikim, that was written by the Rizhiner Rebbe, who is a grandson of the Maggid of Mezrich. That puts him approximately the 4th generation of the Hasidic movement. He's writing about an episode that happened in the 1840s, and he records the following story, which is meant to illustrate and explain to us why it was that Reb Zusha, maybe some people have heard of this Reb Zusha. This is Reb Zusha Va'anipol. He was one of the most prominent Hasidic masters of the third generation of the Hasidim, and in particular one with a very quirky perspective on a number of things. You find a lot of very interesting stories about Reb Zusha and his creative takes on certain situations and difficult moments. A certain kind of humor in many of Reb Zusha's teachings, and a very interesting character to study further. So the way the story goes is like this. I'm not going to tell it storyteller style. I'm reading it from a book. I can't be Rav Ebner. Okay. The story goes as follows. At first, he told a story of, he gave a Hasidic Devar Torah on a certain pasuk from the Parsha. That's not our interest right now. And in fact, this version completely omits the Devar Torah. Achar kach amar bazeh halashon. Then he said afterwards in these words, Reb Zusha lo amar Torah miyamav al hashulchan. Why did Reb Zusha, Hasidic Rebbe, why did he not say a Devar Torah, a vort, at the Tish? Of course, the Hasidic Rebbe has a Tish. Why would Reb Zusha never say Torah at the Tish? Because for whatever reason, the students of the Maggid of Mezrich had decided that they would never say original Divrei Torah. They would only report the Torah that they had learned from their master, their teacher, the Maggid of Mezrich. But, and here's the catch, Reb Zusha never had learned any Devar Torah from the Maggid of Mezrich to say over. And that's why he couldn't give a Dvar Torah at the Tish, because he promised that he would only teach Torah from his teacher, the Maggid of Mezrich, but he never learned anything from the Maggid of Mezrich. How can this be? And this is the story that we're now going to get into. Why was it? What was the character? What was the nature of Reb Zusha's relationship with his teacher, the Maggid, such that he actually never learned anything from him? Let's see. Ka'asher patach zekeni ha-Maggid zal lomar Torah. Whenever my grandfather, the Maggid of Mezrich, would say a Devar Torah, hayat tzarich mikodem lomar ha-pasuk shiomar alav Torah. First, he would have to quote the pasuk. And if you're quoting a pasuk from the Chumash, a paragraph from the Chumash, from this week's parsha, whatever, very often, the beginning of the paragraph will be, Kasher hitchil et lashon ha-pasuk ve'amar teva rishona shebepasuk vayomer or vayedaber. He would say, vayomer or vayedaber, the first word of the pasuk, the first word from the Torah that he was transmitting over. This is just from the words of the written Torah. This is not his Hasidic Devar Torah explaining it. Oteva acheret, or maybe even another word. Hirgish Reb Zusha miyad harat haTorah. He would immediately feel this inspiration, this illumination coming from the Torah Sheomar Zekini HaMaggid that the Maggid of Mezrich was sharing. Vehitchil la'asot tenuot gadolot, and he would start moving. He would start chuckling. He would become totally enraptured in the moment. Ubilbel et hashulchan, and he would disturb the Tish. So you have to imagine the moment. The moment is all of the Hasidim are gathered around the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid of Mezrich is about to give his Devar Torah at the Hasidic Tish Friday night. The Hasidim are thirsty for their teacher's Torah. And Reb Zusha, as soon as he hears the Maggid say the first word from the pasuk, immediately he has this transcendent moment. He has this moment of rapturous engagement with this Ha'arat HaTorah, the inspiration of Torah, the enlightenment of Torah that would come upon him in that moment. And he would all of a sudden start totally causing a ruckus and disturbing everyone. So the story continues. There were some big men. Now, I'm not sure if this is meant physically. These were strong individuals who were able to restrain Reb Zusha, or whether this means they were very high spiritual caliber as well. Of course, these are some of the greatest Hasidic Rebbes of this generation. Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, Reb Nachum Tversky of Chernobyl, and many others. They took him and they pushed him outside of the house. So the Maggid is holding the Tish around the table, especially the Parshat Vayishlach. It's starting to be cold. It's getting to be very cold. So they push him outside. Reb Zusha can't be at the Tish. He's not allowed to engage with what's happening. He would stand in the foyer, or he would stand by the woodshed. Okay. And he would be climbing the walls. He would bang on the walls. And what was Reb Zusha doing the entire time that the Magid was trying to tell a Devar Torah at the Tish for the other Hasidim? Hayat so'ek bekol gadol et hateva sheshama mipizikeni vayomer o vayedaber. The entire time, Reb Zusha would just be screaming out, Vayomer, vayedaber. God spoke. V'kasher pazak sekini lomar Torah, and as soon as the Magid of Mezrich, my grandfather, would stop telling the Devar Torah, nach gamhu v'nishtak, he would calm down and quiet down. He would no longer be in this state of ecstasy, this state of, not sure how to even describe it. Okay, and at that point, they could bring him back inside the house. So he knew all of the Hasidic inspiration, the fire of Torah that was transmitted by the Maggid of Mezrich, because he got it in that first moment just through the word Vayomer or Vayedaber. But he didn't actually know the content of the Devar Torah. He had all of the inspiration and all of the fire and none of the content. And therefore, Reb Zusha never gave a Devar Torah at the Tish throughout his entire life. And I think this is how I remember, at least, Rev Ebner transmitting this story to me before I looked it up inside and then started teaching it myself. There's something incredible for Reb Zusha about just the word Vayomer or Vayedaber. Of Torah, yes, is very important. Content of Torah is crucial. That's where we get all of our mitzvot. That's where we get our guide for life. That's how we have to learn, right? We have to spend a long time learning in order to develop the content. But a huge, huge component of our relationship with Torah and our connection to Torah actually comes at the space before the content arrives in the class. And that's the point of inspiration and the point of, we could say as well, the point of revelation, the point of the word Vayedaber or Vayomer. God speaks to a human being. God speaks to Moshe. The Torah is given over to humanity. If you pause and think, this is perhaps the greatest mystery. It's totally reasonable for a person who looks out into the world and sees the glory and beauty of the natural world, to see incredible accomplishments that human beings have been able to make in short time through all sorts of incredible intellectual endeavors and engineering and science and literature and art and all sorts of things, and to be able to say, there must be a creator behind this. The universe was created. It's another thing. It's a much harder leap, I think, to say, and also the creator of the universe talks to human beings, right? The idea that the universe was created, there was some intelligence and some structure and some guidance behind how this universe came to be and how we are here today. It's a whole other thing to say that creator who is ruling over hundreds of thousands of species of living things on this planet alone and rules over every star and every galaxy and every atom and every molecule, that creator also, so to speak, has time for human beings to talk with us, to communicate with us, to share wisdom with us. And that's the mystery of revelation. That's the question. How is it possible for God to speak to a human being? How is it possible for God to share Torah with humanity? And that mystery lies in the words Vayomer or Vayedaber. Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, that God spoke to Moshe. Already that moment, if you really think about that pasuk encapsulates such an incredible religious moment, the moment of revelation, the moment of divine speech, whatever that is, before the content gets transmitted, the connection that Moshe would have had with God, the connection of what it meant for Bnei Israel. We're celebrating on Shavuot to stand at Har Sinai and hear God's voice. What does that actually mean? That's really incredible. And if we take a look, we're shifting gears a little bit here, but we can talk about, besides the Hasidic story, we can talk about Rav Soloveitchik as well. I'm sorry, I didn't type in the Hebrew here, but I have from the English translation of Ubikashtem Misham, one of Rav Soloveitchik's extended essays that's been published both in Hebrew originally and translated into English. Exploration, really a very deeply existential exploration of the emotional state of the religious personality and how a religious person or prophetic person accesses that emotional connection with God. Rav Soloveitchik here is writing about what does that actually feel like? What does it actually feel like to understand, on the one hand, God's transcendence, and at the same time, to feel that prophecy and Torah revelation is a link between the human being and God. And so this is the translation. Rav Soloveitchik, right? God appears beyond existence. On the contrary, the awareness of the abyss between God and man is heightened. Person has to, on the one hand, as they develop their spiritual understanding and develop their religious personality, they understand actually that they are so much less, so far from whatever God is. And man is aware of his inability to cleave to God. How can a human being possibly access the divine? A human being is one of my favorite short stories. If you look it up afterwards, very short story. You can read it in just a few minutes. Type in, "They're made of meat." And this is a reminder, of course, we know from our tefillot, the phrase basar vadam. A human being is flesh and blood. A human being is bones and muscle and blood. And if you poke them, right, the air goes out the lungs, the blood drains out the body. A human being is fragile. A human being at best lives 120 years. And yet, how can a human being have access to the infinite? How can a human being have access to the creator of the universe? The only link between them is the revelational discourse. The fact that human beings can receive Torah from God, the fact that a human being, a prophet, can hear God's voice, so to speak, and transmit that message to other human beings, that is the connection. That is the point of connection between the creator, the infinite, and the finite human being. The awareness of revelation, as noted above, is manifested mainly in a fearful experience. We know this from so many episodes in Tanakh. We know from Moshe at the burning bush. We know from Yirmiyahu, Perek Aleph, when Yirmiyahu hears God's voice, he doesn't even know what he's seeing. He doesn't even understand. We know Zechariah is terrified, and the angel has to reassure him. All of these different Nevi'im feel a sense of dread and terror and confusion. Abraham, when Abraham has his prophecy for Brit Ben Habitarim, he has a moment of incredible fear and dread. And because you're coming in contact with the divine, with the infinite, with something so far beyond yourself and so incomprehensible. So prophecy, revelation, is a fearful experience, a sense that the order of reality has been conquered by an awesome transcendent power that cannot be grasped by the mind. Because, of course, prophecy is fundamentally irrational, right? It's a process that we cannot understand in scientific, rational, modern terms. Prophecy is straight from God, straight from the creator, something completely apart from every other process. This awareness is filled with a strange secrecy and an amazing super rationality. The idea that there's something mysterious, something secret going on, and that it's scary, and that it's something that you can't really approach, you can't really understand. And Rav Soloveitchik continues later on in the same essay, in chapter 17, he says, not only is the fact of prophecy God's encounter with man an obscure riddle, we don't understand what this is. If someone asks, what is prophecy? Well, I believe in it, but I don't know what it is because I've never experienced it myself. And even the greatest prophets couldn't describe it. An obscure riddle, but even the quest for it, the search for eternity through temporality. How can a temporal human being, how can a person who only lives a short time and experience a small fragment of totality of the universe, how can such a person access the eternity and the universality of God? It is incomprehensible. Earlier, we saw that the mind's demands link it to reality, right? The human mind, of course, we experience things through our senses. We experience things through science and rationality and critical thinking and logic and all of those things that have made us successful as human beings. We might say that they are demands for a cognitively framed solution to the problem of the mystery, inherent, intangible reality. What Rav Soloveitchik is trying to get at here, of course, very deeply existentialist philosophical question, is that, of course, there are limits to what we as human beings can achieve using the tools of our rationality. And so there are always going to be mysteries, there are always going to be questions, there are always going to be riddles and secrets that are inaccessible to the rational mind. And that is somehow part of the goal of prophetic thinking. There's obviously a lot more to be said about this topic and a lot more that's been written about this topic. But to pause and think and recognize that revelation is a mystery. Revelation is a deep secret that can't be fully appreciated, fully understood. The fact that someone like Reb Zusha, very spiritually aware, very spiritually attuned, could, in a moment of just hearing the Maggid of Mezrich say the word Vayomer or Vayidaber, grasp a bite, a taste of that transcendence so much so that he was totally enraptured in that moment and could not sit at the tish. He was overcome, physically overcome by spiritual ecstasy, some kind of trance-like state, some kind of, again, we could diagnose Reb Zusha if we wanted to be critical about it, but I don't think that's the right way to read the story. The fact that Reb Zusha experiences that moment of enlightenment, just hearing the word Vayomer or Vayidaber, that the creator of the universe speaks to human beings. And that's the mystery. That's the question that he's trying to access. And right there, it clicks for him. And he has to be kicked out of the tish and taken to the woodshed, because actually people with such transcendent religious understanding and intuition, they don't belong at the regular table. So I remember this, I'll end with a story of another story of Reb Ebner, which maybe I'll mistell, but I'll try to capture the main point of it, which was that I think this was back in the days of Yeshivat HaMivtar, which is that there was someone who was visiting the yeshiva, and of course, Yeshivat HaMivtar had a range of students, just like Yeshivat Eretz Tzvi has a range of students, some from more traditional backgrounds, some from less traditional backgrounds, some from day school, some not so day school educated, people with different background, different skill level, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, they all need to learn Torah, and they all need to be supported and helped and brought to the Beit Midrash. And so this young man was visiting the yeshiva, and he sees someone who has gotten this spiritual moment sparked recently, that all of a sudden, been studying Chumash, studying Gemara, seen an incredible Midrash. And for this student, if I remember correctly, Rav Ebner said the thing that had really clicked recently was the idea that we're supposed to be Avdei Hashem, we're supposed to be servants of God, we're supposed to do the divine will through the performance of mitzvot and living a life based on Torah. And this student who was visiting from yeshiva day school, from a more mainstream background, heard that and totally freaked, because unfortunately, perhaps, hopefully over the past few decades, it's gotten better. But people in the mainstream, in the regular schools, don't always want to talk about what does it mean to be spiritually attuned. The Reb Zushas get pushed out. The Reb Zushas aren't allowed to sit at the tish. They don't get to hear the Torah because they're so enraptured just by the concept that God could communicate with human beings. I think one of the things that Yeshivat Eretz Tzvi has taken and made a huge part of its mission is making sure that the Torah that's learned is learned, of course, deeply in terms of content, but that it's always infused with a deep spiritual sense, a deep religious sense, a sense of purpose and mission, and a sense that every student has a place at the table. Every student can be guided and helped to grow in their own way, to reach excellence. People coming in the yeshiva at different skill levels end up at very different places than where they were when they came in, because you have incredible rebbeim and incredible support and incredible opportunities. And obviously, I'm here today in large part because of so much of that I learned in Yeshivat Eretz Tzvi from so many of the rebbeim there, Rav Berman, Rav Sussman, Rav Ebner, of course, Moriv Rabbi, Rav Kraus Zatzal, who's no longer with us, but of course, Yeshiva continues teaching his Torah and spreading his legacy. And any and all support that we can give to the Yeshiva to continue their incredible work and support the incredible Talmidim is much appreciated and needed at this time. And it's matching. So whatever monies are raised will be matched by donors as well. So it's double your impact, and it's an incredible, incredible way for us to ensure that Torah is being learned in Eretz Yisrael. Torah is being learned in a very unique way with incredible rebbeim, with so much to teach, and everyone has a part in it. Thank you so much. And if anyone wants to reach out to me and contact me about any questions or to see some of the sources, you can email me at marguliesd@mjbha.org. That's my professional email. I'm happy to answer any questions there as well and to be put in touch. Always wonderful to learn with supporters of the yeshiva, with friends and family, and other alumni. And it's an incredible honor to have been selected to participate in this program. Thank you so much.